It just seemed like somebody trying to sweep it up under the rug, like she was just a nobody. But she was somebody. She was my daughter. She was somebody to other friends that she had that loved and cared about her so much.
A father said something that I can't stop thinking about. He said, "I can just feel her suffering, the last breath she took out her body." He said that about his daughter, a 25-year-old woman who went on a trip with friends and never came home. And then he said something else. He said, "It should be her burying me, not me burying her." And then he said the thing that made me look at this case differently than anyone has before. He said, "They plotted, jealous and envious of her. She didn't see it coming. And when I went through the lawsuit and found what nobody is talking about, that a seventh person was watching the attack live on a phone screen, a person who has never been named, I understood why this father has been standing at a headstone that says Boss Lady for 3.5 years. Because the answer he's looking for might be sitting on someone's phone. Tell me in the comments. Do you think the seventh person still has the recording? Keep watching. I will show you everything. I haven't shown you who the seventh person is yet. I haven't shown you how the attack was broadcast live to someone who wasn't even in the villa. I haven't shown you what this father said about the plot. I haven't shown you what happened when the FBI closed the case. And I haven't shown you why the civil lawsuit could be the thing that finally forces the seventh person's name into the open. Keep watching. If you're new here, welcome. This is a community where we talk about cases like this around the clock. We follow the evidence. We do not stop and we do not look away when a father in Charlotte, North Carolina, buries his 25-year-old daughter after a trip to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, and then spends 3.5 years fighting every institution in 2 countries because the 6 people who were with her told him a lie, and the 7th person who watched it happen has never been named. Whether you're watching this from Charlotte, from North Carolina, from the United States, from around Europe, or any part of the world, let us know in the comments. Comment your location. If you found this video through criminal psychology communities, through true crime communities, through crime networks, through justice reform communities, through women's safety communities, through Black community channels, through HBCU communities, through forensic science communities, through domestic violence awareness communities, through court TV communities, through Dateline communities, or if it was just suggested to you, subscribe and share this video right now. If you have been following this community, you already know what to do. Share this video, suggest it to others, create more awareness, because you are in the right place. We cover cases where the evidence goes deeper than the headline. There is always someone ready to walk through every interview Bernard Robinson gave, every court filing, every detail in the civil lawsuit in the death of Shanquella Robinson on October 29th, 2022 in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. What nobody has put together until now is how the father's words, the FaceTime call that broadcast the attack to a person outside the villa, the 7th witness who has never been named, the plot Bernard described, the boss lady headstone, the FBI failure, and the civil lawsuit that could force the truth into the open all connect to tell you why a father has been standing at a grave in Charlotte asking the same question for 3.5 years, and why nobody has answered him. If you've been following the Shanquella Robinson case on this community, you already know the basics. The trip, the video, the lie, the zero alcohol, the autopsies. This video isn't about repeating what you know. This video is about a father's pain, his words, what he believes happened, and the 7th person that nobody is talking about, the person who watched Shanquella get beaten on FaceTime and has never been held accountable. Now, before I show you what Bernard said, I need you to understand who Shanquella was to this man. Because the coverage talks about the victim, the case, the evidence, but Bernard doesn't talk about a case. He talks about his daughter. Before I show you his words, I need you to understand something. When a father loses his daughter, and the story he's told doesn't match the daughter he raised, he knows. He doesn't need an autopsy to tell him. He doesn't need a toxicology report. He knows. And Bernard knew from the moment they said alcohol poisoning that something was wrong because he raised her. And the story they told didn't sound like the girl he raised. As I promised to show you step by step, you need to hear this. Bernard Robinson's words. Bernard sat down with TMZ on the day of Shanquella's funeral. His daughter was being buried, and instead of grieving in silence, he spoke because he needed the world to know what he already knew in his gut from the moment they told him alcohol poisoning. He said, "I didn't know the friends. I just know they went to college with her. That's about it. They supposed to have been going over there to celebrate one of their birthdays, but evidently I guess they plotted, jealous and envious of her, and did what they did to her for no such reason. She didn't see it coming. Plotted. That's the word Bernard used. Not accident, not misunderstanding, not a fight that went too far. Plotted. He believes, and said publicly, that the people who traveled with his daughter planned what happened to her, that they were jealous of her, envious of who she was, and that they took her to another country because they couldn't do it in Charlotte where her real friends were. He said, for them to do what they did, it was a plot, because they couldn't do it over here where all her friends were. Stay with me, because that sentence changes how you see the entire trip. If Bernard is right, if this was a plot, then the invitation to Cabo wasn't a celebration. It was a setup, getting Shanquella out of Charlotte, away from the people who would have protected her, into a villa in another country where there were no witnesses except the people who planned it. And here's why Bernard's plot theory isn't just grief talking. Because think about what has to be true for the official version to work. The official version says this was a fight, an altercation between friends, something that happened spontaneously. But a spontaneous fight doesn't include a FaceTime call to someone's boyfriend. A spontaneous fight doesn't include recording the attack and posting it on social media. A spontaneous fight doesn't happen to a woman who's naked and unable to defend herself. A spontaneous fight doesn't end with the group waiting 6 hours to call a doctor. A spontaneous fight doesn't end with the group refusing a hospital. And a spontaneous fight doesn't end with the group flying home and telling the victim's mother it was alcohol poisoning. Every single detail, the FaceTime, the recording, the nakedness, the delay, the refusal, the lie, points to something that was planned, coordinated, executed with the precision of people who knew what they were going to do before they did it. Bernard saw that from day one, before the evidence, before the lawsuit, before the world caught up. A father looked at the facts and said, they plotted, and 3.5 years later, nothing in the evidence contradicts him. And here's what Bernard meant when he said, they couldn't do it over here where all her friends were. Because that sentence tells you everything about what he believes the trip was for. Over here means Charlotte. Over here means Shanquella's real friends. The people who actually knew her, the people who would have stepped in, the people who would have said, what are you doing to her? Stop. The people who would have called 911 in seconds, not hours. Bernard believes, and said publicly, that the trip to Cabo was designed to get Shanquella away from the people who would have protected her, away from Charlotte, away from her real community, into another country, into a villa, into a situation where the only people around her were the people who were planning to hurt her. And here's what makes that theory impossible to dismiss. Because if this was spontaneous, if the beating was a sudden fight that nobody planned, then why the FaceTime? Why call your boyfriend to watch? You don't set up an audience for something spontaneous. You set up an audience for something you've been planning, something you want someone else to see, something you're proud of. The FaceTime call is the evidence that supports Bernard's plot theory, because planned events have audiences, spontaneous ones don't. And then Bernard said something about the lie that I need you to hear. He said, the friends ain't tell me nothing. They just told her mom that they came back with the luggage and her phone, just came back and sat down at her sister's house and ate food and sat there and just told them that big lie that it was alcohol poisoning, which I knew it wasn't. They sat down, they ate food in the home of the woman whose daughter they left dead in Mexico. They ate food and delivered a lie. And Bernard, a father who knew his daughter, said he knew it wasn't alcohol poisoning from the moment he heard it. And here's the detail in Bernard's words that should sit with every parent watching this. He said, I didn't know the friends. I just know they went to college with her. That's about it. That's about it. A father who didn't know the people his daughter was traveling with. Not because he was absent, not because he didn't care, because his daughter was 25 years old. She was an adult. She made her own decisions about who to spend time with, and the people she chose to spend a weekend with in another country were people her own father had never met. Every parent watching this. Do you know your child's friends? Not the ones from high school, not the childhood friends you watched grow up, The new ones, the college ones, the ones from work, the ones from the group chat you've never seen. Do you know their names, their faces? Do you know what they're like when the cameras are off and the drinks are flowing and nobody's parents are watching? Because Bernard didn't, and he's not unusual. Most parents of adult children don't know every person in their child's circle. You trust your child's judgment. You trust that the people they choose to be around are good people. You trust because what's the alternative? Following a 25-year-old to every party, vetting every friendship, Bernard trusted. And the people his daughter trusted with her weekend are the people who came home without her and sat in his family's home and ate food and told a lie that the toxicology destroyed on page 1. Every parent watching this. A father's instinct said the story was wrong before the toxicology confirmed it. Before the autopsy, before the video, before any evidence was made public. Bernard knew, because a father knows his daughter, and when the story doesn't match the daughter you raised, type daughter in the comments, because Shanquella was somebody's daughter, and the people who took her from her father have been walking free for 3.5 years. Now, I've shown you Bernard's words about the plot and the lie. And here's the part that nobody is talking about, because the world has been focused on the 6 people inside that villa for 3.5 years, but there's a 7th. And what the lawsuit says about that 7th person changes how you see every single thing about this case. As I promised, this is the detail that changes everything. The 7th person. The civil lawsuit filed by Shanquella Robinson in October 2024 contains a detail that most coverage has either missed or glossed over. It states that during the attack on Shanquella, a FaceTime video call was made to Dijon Jackson's boyfriend so he could watch the beating. Read that again. A FaceTime call during the beating. So Jackson's boyfriend, a person who was not inside the villa, not in Cabo San Lucas, not in Mexico, could watch Shanquella Robinson being beaten while she was naked and unable to defend herself. That means the attack wasn't just witnessed by 6 people in a room, it was broadcast, live, to a 7th person who was watching on a screen, and that 7th person watched a woman being beaten and didn't call the police, didn't call for help, didn't hang up and dial 911 in the United States where he was sitting. He watched. And then he went on with his life. Ask yourself what kind of person watches someone get beaten on FaceTime and does nothing. Because that's not a bystander who froze in the moment. That's a person watching on a screen, a person who has distance, a person who has time to process what they're seeing, a person who could have ended the call and called the police with one tap, and didn't. Every person watching this. The Cabo Six have dominated the conversation for 3.5 years, but there's a 7th person, a person who saw what happened from outside the villa, a person who has never been publicly named, a person who has never been publicly interviewed, and a person who may still have the FaceTime recording on their device. And here's what the 7th person knows that nobody else can tell us. Because the 6 people inside the villa have a shared interest in silence. They were all there. They're all named in the lawsuit. They all have a reason to coordinate their stories and protect each other. Their version of events is contaminated by the fact that they're all defendants. But the 7th person, the one on the FaceTime screen, isn't in the villa, isn't part of the group in the same way, isn't facing the same charges, and saw everything from a distance that the 6 people inside the room don't have. The 7th person knows what the room looked like from the screen angle, knows who else was visible, knows what was being said, not just, can you fight back, but everything before and after, knows how long the attack lasted, knows whether other people in the room were laughing, watching, participating, or trying to stop it, knows whether anyone said anything about what to do next, and knows whether that call was the only one, or whether there were others. That person is walking around right now with that knowledge, going to work, going to dinner, living their life, while Bernard stands at a grave that says boss lady and says, I can feel her suffering. Every person watching this. The 7th person is the key to this case, not the 6 who have coordinated their silence for 3.5 years. The one person who was outside the villa, outside the group, outside the coordinated defense, and saw everything. If that person talks, if Discovery identifies them and compels them to testify, the wall of silence that the Cabo Six have built for 3.5 years collapses. because the seventh person has no reason to protect the six. The seventh person wasn't in the room. The seventh person wasn't on the trip. The seventh person is the crack in the wall. But I haven't shown you what that FaceTime call means for the civil lawsuit. Because if discovery moves forward and July 22nd decides whether it does, that call can be subpoenaed, and the person on the other end can be deposed. Type "I am still here" in the comments, because what the FaceTime call reveals about the nature of the attack is the detail that proves this wasn't a fight. Now, I've shown you the seventh person, and here's what the FaceTime call tells you about what was happening in that room. Because think about this. Who stops in the middle of a fight to call their boyfriend? Who takes the time to dial a number, wait for an answer, and position a screen while they're supposedly in a conflict? Nobody. You don't do that in a fight. You do that in a performance. When the other person can't stop you, when you have all the time in the world, when the person on the ground isn't fighting back, and you want someone else to see it, as I promised, this is what the FaceTime call proves. A fight is chaotic. A fight is two people in conflict. In a fight, you don't stop to call your boyfriend. You don't set up a camera angle. You don't make sure someone outside the room can see what's happening. A fight is survival. It's adrenaline. It's reaction. But a beating is different. A beating is one-sided. A beating gives you time because the other person isn't fighting back. The other person is on the ground, unable to defend herself. And when you have that kind of time, the kind of time where the person you're hitting can't stop you, you have time to pick up a phone, to dial a number, to say, "Watch this." That's what the lawsuit alleges happened. Jackson had enough control over the situation to make a phone call during it. She wasn't defending herself. She wasn't in danger. She was in control, and she wanted someone else to see it. And the voice in the viral video, "Can you fight back?" makes even more sense now. Because if you're performing for an audience, if your boyfriend is watching on FaceTime, you want the person you're beating to participate, to make it interesting. Can you fight back? Isn't a question asked out of concern. It's a prompt for a better show. Every person watching this, Shanquella Robinson, was beaten while naked and unable to defend herself. The attack was recorded on video, and it was simultaneously broadcast live via FaceTime to a person who wasn't in the room. That's not a fight between friends. That's an event, planned, broadcast, watched. And nobody, not the six in the room, not the seventh on the screen, called for help. And Bernard Robinson, the father, said it from the beginning. He said they plotted. He said it was jealousy and envy. He said she didn't see it coming. And he said something else that should break every person watching this. He said all six of them had an opportunity to stop that situation. Neither one of them did nothing about it. Who gave them the right to take a life? Who gave them the right? That's a father asking the world a question that nobody has answered. Not the FBI, not the DOJ, not the State Department, not the courts. 3.5 years and nobody has told Bernard Robinson who gave six people the right to take his daughter's life while a seventh person watched on a phone. And then Bernard said, "I can just feel her suffering." The last breath she took out her body. A father feeling his daughter's last breath, imagining it, carrying it every day for 3.5 years, while the people who watched her die, all seven of them, walk free. But I haven't shown you what Bernard is doing now because this father hasn't stopped. And what he said in February 2025 tells you he's still fighting. Now, I've shown you the seventh person and Bernard's pain. And here's where most people would have stopped, because after the FBI closes your case, after the DOJ declines to prosecute, after the State Department doesn't forward the warrant, most people would look at those closed doors and say, "I tried. I gave it everything. There's nothing left." But Bernard Robinson is not most people. As I promised, this is where Bernard Robinson is right now. In February 2025, Bernard spoke to WBTV at Shanquella's grave at Beatty's Ford Memorial Gardens in Charlotte. Her headstone has her nickname engraved on it, Boss Lady. And Bernard stood at that headstone and said, "Feels like somebody is trying to sweep it under the rug like she was just a nobody. But she was somebody. She was my daughter. She was somebody. She was my daughter." And here's what the world did for Bernard when it heard his story. Because Bernard didn't fight alone. Kyrie Irving donated $65,000 to the family's GoFundMe. Celebrities like T.I., 50 Cent, and Kim Kardashian shared Shanquella's story on social media. Over 709,000 people signed a Change.org petition demanding justice. Hundreds attended Shanquella's funeral in Charlotte. The community showed up, not just online, but physically at rallies, at vigils, outside courthouses, and Bernard said, "By the grace of God, I think I am going to get to the bottom of this. God ain't going to fail." That's faith. After every institution failed him, after the FBI closed the case, after the DOJ declined, after the State Department didn't forward the warrant, a father standing at a grave saying, God ain't gonna fail. Because when the system fails you, when every door closes, faith is the only thing left that keeps you knocking. And here's what it looks like to watch a father operate on faith for 3.5 years. Because Bernard isn't a lawyer. He's not a politician. He's not a public figure with a platform and a team. He's a father, a man from Charlotte who raised a daughter he called his little girl. And when every institution that was supposed to protect her failed, he didn't hire a PR firm. He didn't start a media campaign. He went to her grave. He stood at the headstone and he talked to reporters with tears in his eyes and said, eventually, God gonna do something where there's gonna be evidence. It's coming. It's just the amount of time. It's just the amount of time. 3.5 years. That's the amount of time Bernard has been waiting. Not impatiently, not angrily, with faith, with the quiet certainty of a father who believes the truth has a way of surfacing, even when every system designed to find it has stopped looking. And he said something else at that grave that I think is the most important thing he's ever said about this case. He said, she will be at peace once the United States Department or whoever else involved got to do something with this case. Then she will be at peace. Then she will be at peace. Not Bernard, Shanquella. He's not asking for his own peace. He's asking for hers. A father standing at a grave, asking the system to give his daughter peace, not justice for himself. Peace for her. That's what 3.5 years of faith looks like. Not rage, not revenge. Peace for the daughter who can't ask for it herself. And that's a father who has watched the system close every door and is still standing at his daughter's grave saying her name. Still reminding the world that before the case and the evidence in the lawsuit, Shanquella Robinson was a person, a daughter, a boss, lady who did hair and ran a business and was full of life. And Bernard said something in that same interview that tells you he hasn't given up on the system entirely. He said, I hope the new administration, the DOJ and FBI, come in and start looking at all these files, because someone took their loved one's life and they don't deserve to be hurt like we are. He's asking the federal government to reopen the case. He's standing at a grave in Charlotte asking Washington to look at the files that the previous administration closed. After 3.5 years of closed doors, Bernard Robinson is still knocking, and he said, it should be her burying me, not me burying her. Every parent watching this. That sentence, it should be her burying me. A father who understands the natural order that children bury parents, not the other way around, and is living in the reversal of that order every single day. Standing at a headstone that says, Boss Lady. Asking a system that has failed him at every level to please just once do something. And here's why the civil lawsuit matters more for Bernard than any other process in this case. Because if the July 22nd hearing goes the right way, if the judge denies the motions to dismiss and the motions to stay, discovery begins. And discovery means the FaceTime call can be subpoenaed. Jackson's boyfriend can be deposed, the phone records can be pulled, and the seventh person, and the person who watched Shanquella get beaten live on a screen, can finally be identified, named, and compelled to answer questions under oath. That's what July 22nd means for Bernard Robinson. Not just the civil case, the chance to finally know who the seventh person is, the chance to ask them, you watched my daughter get beaten on a phone screen. Why didn't you call for help? Why didn't you hang up and dial 911? Why did you watch a woman get beaten to death and do nothing? Those questions have answers. And here's what the FaceTime recording could contain if it still exists. Because FaceTime calls on Apple devices create records, call logs, duration stamps, and if the call was screen recorded, which is possible on any modern iPhone, the entire beating could be saved on the seventh person's device. That means somewhere, potentially right now, there may be a recording of Shanquella Robinson being beaten, a recording that shows the attack from the perspective of the person watching on the screen, a recording that shows who else was visible in the frame, a recording that captures audio, not just "can you fight back," but everything else that was said in that room, everything the viral video didn't capture, everything that happened before and after the clip the world saw. If that recording exists, it's the most important piece of evidence in this entire case. More important than the viral video, because the viral video shows one angle. The FaceTime would show what the person on the screen saw, which could be a different angle, a wider view, more of the room, more of the people involved. And if discovery opens in the civil case, if July 22nd goes the right way, the Robinson family's attorneys can subpoena Apple for the FaceTime records. They can identify the seventh person, they can depose them, and they can ask, do you still have the recording? That question alone. Do you still have it? Could break this case open. Because if the answer is yes, the evidence the FBI said was insufficient might be sitting on someone's phone. And if the answer is no, if they deleted it, the question becomes when and why, and whether deleting evidence of a woman being beaten to death constitutes obstruction. And somewhere, on a phone, in a call log, in a FaceTime record, the identity of the seventh person exists. And if discovery opens that record, Bernard Robinson will finally have a name for the person who watched his daughter die on a screen and went to sleep that night in their own bed. Every fact, one breath. Shanquella Robinson, 25 years old, Charlotte, North Carolina, business owner, boss lady. Bernard Robinson, her father. Salamandra Robinson, her mother. October 28th, 2022, Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Birthday trip, 6 people at the Cabo Six. Khalil Cook, Winter Donovan, Alyssa Hyatt, Malik Dyer, Nazir Wiggins, Dejanai Jackson, and now Imani Green. Villa Linda, 32, beaten, naked. Can you fight back? Nobody intervened. FaceTime call during the attack. Jackson's boyfriend, the seventh person, watched live, did nothing, never named, never interviewed. Alcohol poisoning, the lie, 0 alcohol. The truth, severe spinal cord injury, atlas luxation, broken neck, 6-hour delay. Doctor recommended hospital, friends refused. Housekeeper found her. Not a friend. Bernard Robinson, TMZ interview, funeral day. They plotted, jealous and envious. She didn't see it coming. I didn't know the friends. They sat in her sister's house, ate food, told the lie. I knew it wasn't alcohol poisoning. All 6 had the opportunity to stop it. Who gave them the right to take a life? I can feel her suffering. The last breath she took put a hole in my heart. Don't know if God can mend it. It should be her burying me, not me burying her. Boss lady, and engraved on the headstone, Beatties Ford Memorial Gardens. Charlotte, FBI, closed. DOJ, declined. State Departments didn't forward the warrant. Bernard, still standing, still fighting. February 2025, asked Trump's DOJ to reopen. Eventually, God gonna do something? Evidence is coming. She was somebody. She was my daughter. Civil lawsuit. October 2024, July 22nd, the hearing. Discovery could reveal the seventh person. FaceTime records could be subpoenaed. Jackson's boyfriend could be deposed. The seventh person could finally have a name. Type justice in the comments, because Bernard Robinson has been standing at his daughter's grave in Charlotte for 3.5 years. The headstone says, Boss Lady. The father says who gave them the right. 7 people, 6 in the room, 1 on a screen, watched a 25-year-old woman get beaten to death. And not one of them stopped it. Not one of them called for help. And not one of them has been arrested. Share this video, because every share tells Bernard Robinson that his daughter isn't being forgotten. Every share tells the seventh person on that FaceTime call that the world knows they exist. And every share tells the system that a father standing at a grave asking who gave them the right deserves an answer. If you want every development the moment it breaks, subscribe and turn on the bell, because the civil lawsuit is active. July 22nd is weeks away, and the question of whether the seventh person, the one who watched Shanquella Robinson die on a phone screen, will finally be identified and held accountable is a question that Discovery could answer. And here's what Bernard Robinson's fight means for every family watching this. Because Bernard isn't just fighting for Shanquella, he's fighting for every parent who has ever lost a child and been told there's not enough evidence. For every family that's been given a lie by the people who should have protected their loved one. For every father who has stood at a grave and asked a question that nobody will answer. If Bernard wins, if the civil case moves forward, if discovery opens, if the seventh person is identified, if the FaceTime records are subpoenaed, if depositions happen under oath, it won't just be justice for Shanquella, it will be proof that a family can fight the system and win. That a father who was told alcohol poisoning can stand at a grave for 3.5 years and eventually force the truth into the open. And if Bernard loses, if the motions are granted, if the case is sent to Mexico, if discovery never happens, if the seventh person is never named, then the message is clear. A father's pain doesn't matter. A daughter's death doesn't matter. The evidence doesn't matter. And 7 people who watched a 25-year-old woman die can walk away from every system designed to hold them accountable. That's what July 22nd is really about. Not just one hearing, a father's fight, a daughter's name, and the question of whether the system cares enough to answer a man who has been standing at a headstone that says, "Boss Lady," for 3.5 years, asking, who gave them the right? If you're a parent, this case is about you. If you're a daughter, this case is about the person who raised you and would fight for you the way Bernard fights for Shanquella. If you're part of the Black community, this case is about whether the system responds the same way when the victim is a 25-year-old Black woman from Charlotte. If you're a true crime viewer, this case has 6 suspects, a 7th witness on FaceTime, a dead woman with a broken neck, and a father who has never stopped asking questions. And if you believe that Bernard Robinson deserves an answer, subscribe right now. Turn on the bell, share this with every person you know, and here's why this video matters right now. Not 6 months from now, not a year from now, right now. Because the civil lawsuit is the last legal process standing. July 22nd is the hearing that decides whether it moves forward. And if it moves forward, discovery opens. And if discovery opens, phone records can be subpoenaed. And if phone records are subpoenaed, the FaceTime call can be traced. And if the call is traced, the 7th person has a name. And if the 7th person has a name, they can be deposed. And if they're deposed, the wall of silence cracks. And if the wall cracks, Bernard Robinson finally gets the answer he's been standing at a grave asking for since October 29th, 2022. Every step in that chain depends on the step before it. And the first step is July 22nd. One hearing, one judge, one decision, and a father's entire fight comes down to whether that judge says the case stays in Charlotte or gets sent to Mexico. Because on July 22nd, the last door either stays open or closes, and Bernard Robinson will be watching, and we will be here for all of it. All members of the Cabo Six have denied wrongdoing. All individuals referenced are presumed innocent unless charged and convicted in a court of law. The FaceTime allegation is contained in the civil lawsuit and has not been proven in court. Bernard Robinson's quotes are from his public interviews with TMZ, WBTV, WSOC, ABC 11, and Revolt. All information is drawn from court filings TMZ, WBTV, WSOC-TV, ABC 11, Revolt, The Jasmine Brand, Atlanta Black Star Sportskeeda, and confirmed reporting. If you or someone you know is going through a difficult time, help is available by calling or texting 988.